Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Chris Buckle's Album Club. Today, as usual, we will be doing two albums pitted up against each other, randomly picked from a list of submissions from all of us. Nobody knows who picked what until the end, so only good fun. Other than me, of course, I know who picked what, but I'm not supposed to say. So, as usual, today with me I have Ben.
Somebody told me.
Matthew.
Jealousy, turning Satan to the sea, swimming through sick lullabies, choking on your alibi. But it's just the price I pay. Destiny is calling me. Open up my eager eyes, 'cause I'm Mr. MF Doom.
Fan.
Countdown to June 5th.
Oh, yeah, the countdown continues. And we also have a new panelist, bringing our total number of people up to 5. Good odd number. And that is a good friend of mine, Paperface, otherwise known as Paper.
Hello. I disagree with most everything said in that last episode, except for MF Doom is good still, but damn.
Paper was a big fan of the Kill Walls, and he's not happy with how we dragged them just completely through the mud last time. So, yeah, we're going right into it. You all ready to hear what the episodes, what the albums are?
Sure.
Alrighty, here we go. The albums are... The first album is Geography by Tom, I think it's Misch, Misch, I'm not exactly sure how to say his name, but I'm sure someone will correct me. The second album is Damn the Torpedoes by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Kind of a weird pairing, because Tom Petty obviously is a very well known, and I guess I'll get to my initial impressions once we go through everyone else. So, initial impressions, we're going on. We're starting with you, Ben. What are your initial thoughts on this pairing?
See, when you started saying Geography by Tom, I was like, Tom Petty, yeah, that must be it. And then it wasn't. And then it was, the next one was Tom Petty. I don't think I'm actually very familiar with Damn the Torpedoes of his work. I'm quite familiar with a lot of his other work. I don't think I'm really that familiar with this one, though. But I do like Tom Petty, so... Also, shout out to my cousin, who one time, as a kid, requested, as his Christmas present, a Tom Petty CD. Shout out to him.
Based.
Anyway. Tom Petty is great. Mike Campbell is also great. I'm sure this album will be great. I haven't heard it before, though, and none of the songs... I'm sure I have heard these songs, but I don't remember if I have. They're not the era of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers I'm most familiar with. Which is a shame, honestly. As opposed to Tom Misch. I don't know who that is. Let me look. It looks like he is only a handful of years older than Matthew and I, which is kind of concerning.
It is very concerning.
Well, I mean, I think Billie Eilish is younger than I am, isn't she? Yeah.
Also very concerning.
Sabrina Carpenter's older than I am, though. But younger
Sabrina
than Matthew. She's younger than Matthew, but older than I am.
Yes.
Anyway, okay, so what is this? I can't even tell what genre this is. Sounds like Wikipedia lists the following genres for this artist. Oh, artist, not from the album. It doesn't list any from the album. New soul, new jazz, funk, jazz, hip hop, electronic, jazz, funk, acid jazz, R&B, jazz rap, ambient, new disco, and alternative.
Yeah, like that barely narrows it down.
Yeah. This album could be really great based off of that, or it could be very mad. Because I've listened to things described like that have been either. I do see that he covered "Isn't She Lovely," so shout out to "Songs in the Key of Life." That is a great album. And so that's all I really gotta say about the album. I have no clue what it is, other than it has a cover of that song from "Songs in the Key of Life." But I look forward to listening to it.
Matthew.
I have heard of Disco by Tom Misch. I know somebody who is a fan of Tom Misch and this music. So I'm looking forward to that. As for this Tom Petty album, I've definitely heard of Tom Petty. Um, but I think the one I know is Full Moon Fever. Um, I've actually heard of this album before. I've listened to this album before. I don't remember if I listened to it in full. But I'm looking forward to doing it again and delivering my verdict on both.
Fan.
I've never heard of this Tom Misch guy. Looks like he studied jazz guitar in college, so we have that in common, I guess.
He's about the same age as you, too.
Yeah, he is a peer of mine, technically, so
maybe
I'm
you
going
and
to
him are
judge
the
him
same
extra
person.
harshly.
Maybe you're the same person. We'll never know. Is Tom
Yeah,
Misch in the
he's
room?
British.
Well, I'm British too, so not really. But
Yeah, I don't know. I will listen to it. As for Tom Petty, I mean, yeah, who doesn't know Tom Petty? This one has, I know, Refugee. I like that one a lot. So yeah, we will listen to Tom Petty and Tom Misch, Battle of the Toms.
Tom Club,
There will
even.
be, yeah, Tom. We should do a third Tom Club. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so Battle of the Toms. We will see what Tom is reign supreme.
Alright, people, you're up.
All right, so like everyone else, I have not really heard of Tom Misch, but I do like that there's a De La Soul feature on this album, so I'm definitely excited to listen to this guy. Interested in the genre choices as well. And for Tom Petty, I have a lot of... Tom Petty is a great artist, is no surprise to anyone, but I have not heard of this album at all, so I am also excited to hear more of Tom Petty with this album here. And in general, the genres do not seem to really align at all here, so just kind of similar to the last one to a degree. This would be a good matchup, I think.
Alright, and taking the ball there, moving back to me, my initial thoughts on this. Tom Petty I am very familiar with. I can't remember if I've listed this album all the way through. I know I have both the albums right before this one on vinyl, and I have one right after. Not sure if I have this one, but this is album with Don't Do Me Like That and Refugee. I'm very familiar with those. I also know Here Comes My Goal and Even the Losers is also, it looks like, singles on this. Some of these album tracks, several songs don't sound too familiar for me, but Tom Petty was always, especially on his older albums, was kind of like that. It would be sort of, you'd have these really good big singles, but you'd have some kind of like, they weren't bad, but they were still good, but they were less memorable kind of album tracks. He did get better about that as time goes on. In my opinion, it's only by the time of Full Moon Fever there was less, I guess, padding. But this is kind of earlier on. This is 1979. This is only his third album. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, not just Tom Petty, like Full Moon Fever, but maybe the other Heartbreakers don't quite get the kind of recognition they really deserve. Maybe we'll discuss that a bit more here later in the video, but that's basically my thoughts. I like Tom Petty. I like his style. I like his sound. Big fan. So, yeah. As for Tom Misch, I have no clue. I can't even, just reading the having been read the genres, I can't even really fathom exactly what this is going to sound like. I know earlier, when we did Wise Blood, I believe, Titanic Rising, that I remember had a bunch of genres listed kind of like this, with like ambient and stuff. Now, I don't think hip-hop was one of those, like this one is, but still, that's like the closest, like, I guess, yardstick I have to measure this from, just in terms of like having a bunch of kind of modern genres and subgenres listed, but I'm not exactly sure. It probably won't sound like that, but we'll just see. I'm going into this one basically completely blind. I think other than Matthew, we all, maybe even him, he's going in, it sounds like, mostly blind, just not completely, but all the rest of us, it sounds like we're going in completely blind to Tom Misch. So, this is kind of like, we've done this before, like when we did Michael Jackson versus Slater Kinney, well, like, one of the albums was like a very much, like, one of the artists was very much like a known factor, and then one of them is like a complete unknown to us, which I did not mean to make a Bob Dylan reference there, but I did, apparently. So, Tom Misch, he's the unknown factor. Tom Petty, he's the known factor. So, Tom's, we'll see which one's better. I certainly do have my biases towards classic rock, but not everyone here has that like me. And who knows, I might be blown away by geography. So, we'll just have to see. So, we are going to go listen to these albums, and formulate our thoughts on them, and we'll be right back to give our thoughts on them. So, stay tuned. Alright, we are back and have listened to the albums, and we're here to give our thoughts on them. The first album was Geography by Tom Misch, or I still haven't exactly figured out how to pronounce his name, but I believe that's right, especially since whoever picked this album hasn't corrected me. Also, I don't really see how else it could be pronounced. So, Geography. Ben, what are your thoughts on Geography?
I find Geography very interesting. Of course, I got second place in the Oklahoma State Geography being. Often when I'm out walking, I'm like, it's interesting how you go up and down these hills, how these hills define the shape of the town. So Geography is very interesting. More seriously, I found this album pretty good. A common comment for me, to be sure. I think that the jazz elements work particularly well on here. I thought that it was a nice, smooth album. I think that the guitar playing in particular, which I'm sure we will hear more about from Fan, the jazz guitar work on here, really added to the album, even if it seems to be only on a few songs. Specifically, the Isn't She Lovely cover, which was my favorite song on here, alongside the song prior to it, which is featuring De La Soul, who I'm sure people were very familiar with. Or might be at least. But as I said, I think the guitar work stood out on that, but there's actually not that much guitar work otherwise in here. But there's quite a bit of violin work. Oh, I don't know if that's a word. And I thought that the instrumentals worked well on here. I thought Tom Misch was a good single. That a lot of the songs were quite pleasant. I don't really have that much more to add about it, though. I enjoyed listening to this. This was a nice album to listen to while walking through the rain, which is what I did. So yeah, I'm gonna let Matthew and Fan give more thoughts on this.
Well, Matthew's next, so Matthew.
I really enjoyed listening to Geography. I've listened to this before, and oftentimes when I re-listen to these albums for Album Club, it kind of gets better, unless you're Vita La Vida by Coldplay and Hot Fuzz by The Killers. But my favorite tracks on this album are Disco Yes, which is my favorite track of the album. How It Runs Through Me, which was the De La Soul feature. You're on My Mind. Um, Lost in Paris. The Isn't She Lovely cover, which was just him playing the guitar, and it was quite lovely. I also like how it ends. Like, we've come so far. Like, you can take it metaphorically about life, you've come so far, but also you can take it literally about how the album you have come so far, basically. Excuse me. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed this album.
Fan.
Okay, so I kind of have very little to say about this record. This is all that newfangled jazz hop stuff that's all the rage. Unsurprisingly, it is not all the rage to me. I'm not really sure what I'm listening to here. It's not jazz. The language isn't there. Yeah, it's not funk. It's not really hip hop. It's basically just a watered down pop version of all three of those combined. I'm not really too sure what to say about this. The music didn't really have that much soul. It acts like it does. I don't see a lot of it. There are parts, there's a little bit, but it's a lot more lifeless than I think it projects itself as being. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from the King, Donald Fagen, and he once said, "I like jazz, I like fake jazz, and I like fake jazz." Well, this is fake jazz. And this is just not good. And out of... and I pretty much, well, out of, no, I'm just gonna refrain from further discussion on this record. I don't really have much to say.
Well, viewpoints like that are always interesting. Thank you, Fan. Moving on, we have Paperface. Paper, take it away.
All right, so I do like the general sound and identity of this album, like the whole hip hop, pop, jazz fusion angle. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm not a huge fan of Tom Misch's voice. Like it feels like not like generic, but just like, as kind of what fans said, a little like soulless to me. Like nothing really stands out about his performance. But I am a big fan of the instrumentals on this album. So it kind of feels like he'd be a better producer than a singer songwriter to me, but I don't really know. Because like on some songs, like for instance Disco Yes, his voice kind of falls flat, especially compared to the feature on that song. Like and also I do feel like Disco Yes kind of missed out on a third verse where it's more of a duet. Because it just kind of ends halfway through. Like it feels a little incomplete to me. But back to his vocal performance and instrumentals. Like I love the instrumentals on "Cause I Love You," "You're on My Mind," and "Water Baby," but his voice just kind of falls flat to me, especially on "Water Baby." The instrumental had me excited, and especially the feature on that one as well. I think is Loyal Carner. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but his delivery also sounded pretty deadpan and not very enthusiastic about it, if that makes any sense. But yeah, some standouts to me. I do like the monologue opening before Paris, leading into after Paris. The instrumental left a good impression on me to start with this album, and I think my favorite songs on this album are, to go along with my not a big fan of the vocals, would be TikTok with the Apollo 11 sample and We've Come So Far with I actually do like his voice on We've Come So Far. It blends in with the track better, I think, than the rest of the album. It's just like it's a good song, good instrumentals. I can see myself listening to them a lot. And all in all, I think this album would be better without Tom Misch's singing, which is a little unfortunate, but that's my main takeaway from this album. Just promising instrumentals bogged down by some mediocre vocals.
Alright, well, that brings us to me. It's my turn, and I actually have quite a bit to say about this album, kind of like people just then. I'm just kind of gonna go through it in order. So, the album started off, I thought, fairly weak. It did take me a while on the first time I listened to it here to get into it, and I've listened to this a couple times now, but first time it did take me a while to get into it. Lost in Paris seemed familiar. Not sure if I'd heard that song before somewhere, but it did seem familiar. I think maybe I had heard it somewhere before on the radio or something, probably around the time this came out. It also reminded me of how a certain member of the album club is obsessed with Paris, and has all sorts of weird fantasies about Paris. Anyways, we got to South of River. I liked that one. I thought the instrumental was good. The violin stuff, kind of, I believe that was, I did like as well. It was kind of the first song I thought it was like really good here on this album. That was South of River. I believe that's track 3. Yes, it's track 3. So I liked that. It was a bit of a lull. I didn't care for the next couple songs that much, but I really did then like It Runs Through Me with De La Soul. That was a very groovy song. I really liked kind of the rhythmic, style. I really did like that song. I didn't really notice that Isn't She Lovely cover that much. Like, I feel like it does actually, as a cover, generally work. It blends into the studio album very well, as opposed to sticking out like a sore thumb. Like, for instance, we've talked about covers like that on here before, that things that probably were better off not covered, such as the Beyonce, Jolene cover and stuff. And the Isn't She Lovely cover on this album, the Stevie Wonder cover, did actually, I feel like, blend in very, very well. So much so that I barely noticed it was a cover, despite being a song that I'm well familiar with, and actually a song we've covered in its original form here on the Album Club before, so I didn't find like an amazing cover that was a standout track to me. I just, since someone else did mention it again, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot that was even there, so I did want to say, I do think it did blend in with the overall style very well. I also kind of like Disco Yes, although its disco style kind of caught me off guard when it started. It was like, hey, this sounds like disco, and it's like, wait, Matthew mentioned something about that last time. Then we got to You're On My Mind. That was another one I liked. It was lyrically pretty bland, but it did have good guitar stuff. I also liked Cause I Love You. That was kind of like It Runs Through Me. Both were pretty groovy. And then, of course, at the end of the album, we had We've Come So Far. Now, I know someone said they liked that. I think it was Matthew, but I didn't really care for that one. It had some cool guitar work and production tricks, but it was just very lyrically bland, and I just couldn't really get behind it. But that's enough for kind of talking about just the songs. As for the album as a whole, I thought the best songs were definitely It Runs Through Me and Cause I Love You. Those were very groovy, very rhythmic, very good songs. But as people said, there were very good instrumentals throughout, and that I think certainly holds true. I agree with a lot of what people said. The vocals, I'll agree with him. I'm not as negative towards the vocals on this. I don't think he is, but I will say this guy is not an amazing singer or anything. He's just kind of like okay at best. And this guy, yeah, if he was a producer, if he was, because I don't know if this album's self-produced or not. I guess I should look. Yeah, it looks like it is. So yeah, that kind of makes sense since this isn't really So it looks like it is. So yeah, I think People's right. This guy would be good as a producer. Like, imagine if he had someone who could actually really sing here, basically. Imagine if we had this style with somebody with a great, soulful voice. That would be great. That would be one of the albums. Imagine if this guy had produced like an Adele album or something. That'd be very cool. I will say I also took some issue with the songwriting as well. Production was good throughout. The instrumentation, the instrumentals, those were great throughout. But the songwriting kind of wavered around. Even at its best, I wouldn't say there were any lyrics that really wowed me. At its worst, on some songs like We've Come So Far, I did find the lyrics got pretty repetitive pretty quickly, and were a little on the bland side. So, yeah. But the voice, I feel like that's maybe... It's a weak spot on the album. I'll also say the songwriting, though, is kind of maybe not exactly a weak spot, but maybe like a pothole on the album. I guess that is a weak spot of a sort, so... as for genre, because Fan was going into this, whether or not this is jazz or what I'd say this is, in a way, is it's sort of like a modern version of some of these, like, hipster coffee shop albums. It's kind of like the Cardigans, in a way. I mean, it doesn't sound obviously exactly like them. It does have more, different elements, more kind of hip-hop and stuff elements. I wouldn't call this album hip-hop at all, though. Unlike what we said that Wikipedia said this guy was earlier on, apparently, in our initial reactions. This is not hip-hop at all. I wouldn't call this jazz either. It's maybe jazz infused, but I wouldn't even call it jazz rock or anything. It's sort of one of those like hipster coffee shop guitar albums, and it's kind of like the Cardigans in a way. Ben, I know, also said he thought Son Etienne, when we did them, had kind of similar vibes to the Cardigans. I sort of disagreed, but I can kind of see some elements of that here as well. Just it has kind of that kind of, in this case, millennial, but also just kind of a hipster kind of coffee shop vibe. I don't know how to exactly explain it. It is a very kind of millennial sounding album. It's got lots of flannel vibes, I guess. Not Justin Timberlake flannel, but inner city flannel. People who wear flannel, but like also like living in, Chicago or somewhere. So kind of vibes like that. As for other comparisons to albums we've done previously, I did think this album was kind of like a more stylistically diverse, better produced version of John Mayer's Room for Squares. The songwriting here was not exactly the same. Obviously, John Mayer has his own style, but this also did kind of remind me of it. In some ways, I'm not exactly sure why, but I feel like that kind of had the same vibes. Which is weird, because I think that album is kind of a single songwriter album, being about the lyrics first and the kind of a production later. And this album, I think of kind of like the production instrumentals first and songwriting later to a degree. But I did feel like there was something similar, that maybe songwriting like that was at least maybe a bit of the aim, if it didn't actually quite reach that. But that's just kind of some of my kind of initial impressions, but I do feel like there was at least some similarities. So yeah, that's about it for my thoughts on this album. So unless anyone has anything else they want to say, we're going to move on to the next album, which was Damn the Torpedoes by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And as usual, we're starting with you, Ben.
Yes. So I said in the older part of this video that I was like, oh, I don't know if I know any of these songs. That was completely and utterly not true. I was already quite familiar with the song Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, and Don't Do Me Like That, all three of which are very famous songs. But maybe pulling back briefly, trying to think about what is this album, what does it stand for, what is its musical appeal, and I do think maybe starting with a contrast that Tom Petty himself made. Tom Petty, when the album The Wall came out, he said, quote, I hated them that yell because it was number one and it was blocking the server from getting to number one during that time. And try to think about, no, it's not that he hates that album's content or its sound, just that he hated, in quotation marks, that they were blocking this album from number one. But I think that this contrast is maybe a good way to start to think about this. So, Pink Floyd's The Wall, I think in some ways represents the epitome, so to speak, of not quite prog rock, of course, but I'll let Fan weigh into that some, but this kind of very ambitious, but not, I would say not prog rock, yes, but like this kind of same trend in some sense of very ambitious, complicated, high alt rock. That Pink Floyd's The Wall is aiming, even though it's not musically, prog rock. That has this kind of rock opera ambition to it, right? That defines the sound. It deals with all these themes that I'm not going to get into because I'm not relevant here, but just kind of almost somebody's excess. But I think it's a better, or maybe even best example of somebody's rock excess. Emphasis of it's well done. That Pink Floyd is good. And what is this very ambitious thing? Alright. Now we often think about this in relation to punk. Right? Well, we'll say, well, punk ends up being a reaction to that. That punk is a simplification, which it was, to be sure, that it was like this return. And this is how rock critics definitely took it at the time. It's like, oh, this is a return to this simple rock and roll. I think in some way that ends up being true for Holland rock, or at least just Tom Petty kind of drawing on swings. Now, it is very different than punk in many obvious ways. Its vibe isn't the same. Its attitude is not the same at all. But this isn't trying to go back to a kind of a 50s, not sound exactly, but simplicity, maybe. I think that this ends up capturing kind of an opposite's not the right word, but like the other side of a coin of 50s rock, like a rockabilly, rock and roll. Punk is drawing from the whole gnarly edge of it, but this is drawing from kind of this more rootsy, more folk-inspired edge of old rock and roll. I mean, and I think a good example of this is not this, but Bob Seger, who is a slightly more excessive artist, a little bit, but not really. Well, he's like, I like that old time in rock and roll. That sentiment here is, yes, big contrast against disco and specifically bands like disco, but this kind of attempt to try to reclaim this older moment or take back up this older moment in rock is, I think, in contrast with something like Pink Floyd's The Wall, and I think that ends up defining this album as well. So, what do I mean by that? Well, for one, there was just definitely the band, the Heartbreakers, and the session musicians on here, etc. It is not completely simple. There was a lot of voices organ work on here, thanks to Ben Tinch, that I thought was quite good, especially on songs like Refugee. I hold that in now that I thought sounded good. The main thing in this is this kind of folksy, rootsy singing, and then the guitar work done by Mike Campbell. And a lot of this is this kind of more simplified, more folksy sounding version of it, even though I would not say that these songs are musically simple, or like, it's not to the point of like this ideal type punk simplicity, of course. But it is drawing on, and I think this is one of the two main, like elements or like figures that dominate over this album come in, which is one, Bob Dylan, and then two, Bruce Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen, of course, does have very complicated instrumentals, and Bob Dylan did as well, starting with Electric Dylan. And I think that those are the figures that are really being taken uphill. We talked about this kind of old rock and roll simplicity being taken uphill. I think that is definitely true, but it's being taken up through Electric Dylan, and then Bruce Springsteen. Now, Chris on his channel has commented in his Bruce Springsteen album reviews that it feels like a Bruce Springsteen's first album. That he's kind of riffing on Bob Dylan. He's trying to be New Jersey Bob Dylan. And I think in some ways Tom Petty is trying to be a Florida? I guess he's from Florida. There's not really anything distinctive of Florida Bob Dylan. Or Florida Bruce Springsteen in some sense. But I do think his vocals always, and this is just how his voice is, almost always sound like Bob Dylan's to some extent. But I think it's particularly apparent on the song like Refugee. Even though it's, it's not a Bob Dylan song. The songwriting here is not very Bob Dylan-y. It has quite a bit of Bob Dylan, like, the way he's singing is I think pretty purposely drawing on Bob Dylan. And I think a lot of the instrumentation, as I said, is drawing on either Electric Dylan, and then also the development of Bruce Springsteen. I think that's what's being drawn on. Even though Tom Petty's not just copying them, he is trying to get at, I think, going back in this more simple form of rock through that, as opposed to trying to just riff on them. I think that's not entirely correct. So, more specific comments on the tracks. I think that the song Refugee is pretty strong. It's a strong album opener. I think that the sentiment of, like, you don't have to live like a refugee, you don't have to live chaotically because of a relationship, Christian Walk, is kind of silly, but it is still a really good song, very solid instrumentation. I think the songwriting does work on it, even if it is kind of silly. I think that, it works pretty well. I think that this is a really, really good song. I think that Here Comes My Goal is also really, once again, kind of simplified, folk-inspired, though apparently Tom Petty also said that the song was inspired by Blondie, which is fascinating. Is that Blondie? Blondie is kind of I don't really get how that is about it, but the Boards as a artist that Tom Petty cited as inspiration. But I really think in some sense it does have this kind of '60s vibe. Like, Here Comes My Goal, almost like this group. The Boards is an example of kind of this folk, I don't know, boy group synthesis. Of course, the Boards aren't really a boy group, but it's just the way that the chorus plays out. It almost reminds me of like a girl group, but of course it's folk inspired in the rest of the album. Well, and in the song, right? It has, that sense it is almost verging on kind of a Springsteen like shout, even though it's not doing that. Maybe I can see that as like a cousin to that. Once again, excellent work by Mike Cabell on guitar. Even the Losers was a song that I was not very familiar with, but I think that that it was a pretty. I think that was also a pretty interesting song because it's like even the Losers get lucky sometimes. This is clearly about. Well, I think we can imagine. Tom Petty, I guess, being a loser and getting lucky anyway. I don't know. A song that I thought was kind of weird, and its lyrics were almost. It kind of reminded me of. I'm blanking out on it. Like, Ziggy Stardust a little bit. It was just like, we're going to XYZ City with Century City. I think that was. I don't know how I feel about that. I think that was a pretty solid song though. Not an album. I mean, Ziggy Stardust is definitely a solid album, that's for sure. And then, of course, then on side 2, the opening track, side 2 is Don't Do Me Like That, which is an iconic song. It is funny that apparently they consider giving that song to the J. Jealous Gauls, or how it was pronounced. It looks like Wikipedia saying that it's pronounced Gauls. The band that later made Centerfold, which, of course, was a pretty successful band in the 70s, too. We forget that. But I'm glad they didn't, because this is one of the greatest Tom Petty songs. It is an actual shout. Of course, it's meant to be shout. Finally, I would like to comment on the closing track, Louisiana Rain. You know, despite the Florida Dylan aspect, I mean, there was this kind of like idea of going to Baton Rouge, like it was trying to grasp at Southern rock in this song. Oh, kind of like a Southern, still folk though, not like swamp rock. It's not like Almond Brothers or Leonard Skinner, which we all know what some people think about Leonard Skinner. But an attempt to try to grasp at kind of this more almost bluesy kind of southern folk rock. I think that is really good. So even though it is kind of a little odd, I don't know if I actually think it's odd. Tom Petty is from the South, even though he does not sound very southern. Anyway, to summarize, because I know I said a lot, I think that this album was very interesting. I actually really do like how it draws on Dylan and Bruce Springsteen and how it tries to recover this kind of rockabilly or otherwise 50s moment through its use of simplification. I think that its contrast with, or its relationship with the other work that was going on in the 70s, both in terms of punk and in terms of like fog-like things like The Wall, I think makes a more satisfying case for this album being an interesting album. Though even if there wasn't that context, the album would still just have some really good songs on it. And I think is altogether a good collection. So I will now yield and let Matthew speak.
Matthew, take it away.
I wish this album was as interesting as The Wall, as Ben was talking about. But on a serious note, I enjoyed this album fine, good enough. I thought I've actually heard this album in bits. I didn't finish it, but when this album was announced, I took it as a good opportunity to basically re-listen to it fully. And I thought it was a good album. I really like Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, Don't Do Me Like That, What Are You Doing in My Life, Louisiana Rain. I like the pacing of this album. But one big criticism I had with this album was that it was. I had a feeling when I was listening to this album, I was like, I'd rather listen to a Bruce Springsteen album than this current album because he was. There was like points where Tom Petty was trying like do too much of a like an homage to Bruce Springsteen, except Tom Petty is a better singer than Bruce Springsteen. Um, I kind of felt like I always say that like I'd rather have an artist basically try to do their own thing than trying to imitate other well-known artists. Um, but this is also like one of his first albums that he's done, so I won't give him that much flack. Um, because yeah, this is like their third album, so like it's not that much of a negative, but I kind of felt like I'd rather listen to a Bruce Springsteen album. But otherwise, I thought it was a solid album.
I do want to just, before we go on to fan take, just a brief minute to say that Tom Petty, even as he further polished his sound and everything, did always sound still pretty similar to that. I don't necessarily think he was. I mean, his music is similar and inspired by Springsteen, but I just want to say I don't particularly think he's particularly trying to be just like Springsteen. This was always kind of his style. It's not like he went through some phase where he was pretending to be Bruce Springsteen or anything. Go ahead.
I basically use that as him sounding. It's not like really the music wise. A big like singing voice. I'm just like, I'd rather listen to Bruce Springsteen. And especially this was during when Bruce Springsteen was starting to hit big, and like he already done Born to Run and Darkness on the Edge of Town, which were like his first couple really good albums. But that was me. It was mostly my criticism of Tom Petty sounding like Springsteen, and I guess a lesser extent, Dylan is like, it's like singing wise. It's not really like, oh, he's just literally stealing from the cover of that Guns N' Roses song. But yeah, but it's also like this was like the third album that he did, and it's like, he will further like define his work. So that's basically most of my criticism.
Oh, right. Well, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree, Phil. Next, it's Fan's turn. Fan, take it away.
Alright, so this is a really solid record here. This is like a classic Petty Heartland rock. I was looking into it a bit, and Springsteen has always been the most associated artist with that genre. But for me, it's always been Petty. Like, I don't know why, he just is that sound to me. Refugee is a great song, one of my favorite Petty songs. But he definitely has a very unique quality to him. You can see why Tom broke out, because even if it's not the most impressive music in the world, there's something very specific about Tom that you can't really get elsewhere. He has this very specific vibe that is Tom Petty, and not something you can get from someone else. I don't think this album is like overly impressive, but there really aren't any flaws. I think the singles were the correct choices. Refugee, Don't Do Me Like That, absolute classics. The Cream definitely rises to the top on this album. Most part, Don't Do Me Like That has a really great 3-note guitar hook between the times they say Don't Do Me Like That, and that's just such a great touch. I love that. Totally just small detail, but that really adds a lot to the song. Although You Tell Me is a great song that actually could have also been my favorite on this record. I really, really like that. This is something that happened while I was listening to it. My internet got screwed up for a minute. was just acting wonky, as I'm sure has happened to everybody. And instead of completely fading out of "What Are You Doing in My Life," it skipped right to "Louisiana Rain," and it just started making those like weird like sounds at the first 5 seconds of it, and then it just stopped. And so I thought like my headphones were broken or something weird just happened, because that's all I heard, and then I was so confused as to what just happened. And then like 5 minutes later, once I finally got back and listened, I'm like, oh, okay, that's just part of the song, and it just randomly skipped to it. So that was really weird. But the song itself, good song, despite the fact that it did kind of freak me out for a minute there. So definitely, overall, I did really like this album. This isn't mind-blowing, but it shows Petty's strengths as a songwriter. He's not a singles artist, as this record has plenty of good songs on it. Very solid. The hits are great. It has a couple of really solid deep cuts, and I don't think there was any song on this album that was below a 5 or a 6. So this is maybe not like your ultra amazing all highs album, but there are no lows. There is no the floor is high, and the ceiling is not super high, but the floor is very high. So this is a great listen, very consistent. Enjoyed this one.
Alright, Paper, it is your turn.
All right, so I did overall enjoy this album, but it was really only after my second listen. Like, the first album wasn't bad by any means, but like, I think it's my fault for having like, I guess, high expectations, because the only like thing I've heard from Tom Petty before was Full Moon Fever, and I was a fan of that. But I felt a little let down, oddly. I don't know. Again, that's my fault. But Tom's vocal style on this album warranted a little getting used to for me, but I came around on it. Again, this album is definitely a second listen for me that really made it better. I do think the middle tracks, like I can't remember their names at the very moment, but they blended together a little for me, sounding a little samey, but I still think they were all solid all around, because I mean it helped that the sound that did feel a little samey to me were all a good sound. But the clear standout for me on this album is "Don't Do Me Like That," because I'm a sucker for catchy songs and I love being able to sing along. And unlike the rest of the album, this one did stand out on my first listen, so I'm gonna get several repeats in the future of that one. I like catchy songs. I also enjoyed "Refugee" a lot, but again, only after like halfway through my second listen, because my first listen, Tom's voice felt a little like slurry and unintelligible, but like, I don't know. And for the fourth biggest song by the Heartbreakers, it just didn't really live up to how good songs I like by them, like "Learning to Fly" or "Don't Come Around Here No More" or "Mary Jane's Last Dance" are to me, but that's bias. So, but I mean, that's really what opinions are, and still rocking though. Rocking guitars all around. In general, the first 3 songs of this album only really clicked with me on my second go. Like "Here Comes My Girl," the awkward verse delivery took some getting used to, but again, came around on it. And but yeah, "Refugee," "Even the Losers," "Here Comes My Girl," all really solid tracks to me. I also really enjoyed "Louisiana Rain," even with the weird long opening. It was still a great closing track to this album. But yeah, "Don't Do Me Like That" is the clear winner for me overall. Sorry, I don't have too much to say, too much crazy about this album, but still a nice entry into Tom Petty's discography.
And that brings us to me. So, here were my thoughts on the album. Yeah, I do actually think I had heard this one before. As I said, I own the 2 albums before this one on vinyl, and I also own the one after this one. I've just been meaning to get this one as well here at some point. But I do think I had followed this album before, because I recognize all the songs. Some of them do stand out more than others. Obviously, these singles, things like "Refugee," "Even the Losers," "Don't Do Me Like That" stand out better than some of these other songs like Century City or You Tell Me. But overall, I'd say this is a pretty, consistent, well-rounded. I would say this is a better lineup than I remember his first two albums having. Although I haven't listened to those all that much, other than the singles. But I do have his first two albums, and I remember them being a bit weaker than this. I also remember the next one, despite having my favorite Tom Petty song, the next album after this, whose name is escaping me right now, but I also remember that one being a bit weaker in terms of track listing than this one. So this was kind of like, for Tom Petty in his early career, like this was Tom Petty the Heartbreakers. This was a very, very good album. This was at the time their best album, and would be for a while longer. There were at least a couple better Tom Petty albums. Full Moon Fever and Wildflowers, I think is his name. Or both. Is that right? Anyways, they were both really good albums, although they're technically both Tom Petty solo, actually, not Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So I don't know if we should really count that or not. But it's also like the Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers album. This is like really, really up there, top tier. So yeah, this album, good vocals. Tom Petty, of course, is a great singer. He has kind of a very interesting quality to his voice. He could kind of sound kind of like hicky on the horror parts, but he could sound very tender and kind of soft and delicate, I guess, on kind of softer parts. I'm not saying he's like my favorite singer of all time, but I do think he has some good range that he can do. Actually, he's I think kind of an underrated singer in a lot of ways. The songwriting, while some of the songs did dip a bit more than others, I do think that it was pretty consistent. This whole album, in terms of delivery, had great Heartland rock delivery, lots of good rocking guitars. And so it did really, all these songs blended together pretty well. There weren't high dips or peaks. There were still pretty high peaks over some of the other songs. There weren't huge dips either. So that's always something I just like to comment on. Consistency is key. That's what Adele said. And, she was right. I do think this was really good. Just throughout, even if some of the songs in the middle were weaker, I do think it made a pretty good, well-rounded package. My favorite song of the album was probably Don't Do Me Like That. I know somebody else, Paper, I believe, said that. That's, I think, probably the right answer. Refugees also up there. Both of them were really good songs. Here Comes My Goal and Even the Losers, also really good. So was What Are You Doing in My Life in Louisiana Rain. That was also pretty good, but Don't Do Me Like That. That's up. That's like the top. Refugee. That's also really up. Like right, just on the heels of Don't Do Me Like That. Some Tom Petty's best songs there. And it's just a really, really, I think, well-rounded, really good album. So, well, the other album we did, I said, was kind of inconsistent in terms of voice and songwriting. This one had, certainly, I feel like, more consistent songwriting and good vocals. Yeah. And on that note, that is going to lead us into which album we like better, unless anyone has anything else they want to say specifically on Tom Petty. We have been talking about him for a long time. Matthew, go ahead.
Let's just go to the final vote.
All right, we'll go to the final vote. Okay, so basically that brings us, as I said, to the final vote. We're starting with you, Ben. Which one of these albums did you like better, Geography or Damn the Torpedoes?
Damn the Torpedoes. Full speed ahead.
All right, Matthew.
Geography.
Any clarification as to why?
I think I just picked Geography over Damn the Torpedoes.
Okay, good enough, I guess. Fan?
Despite the fact that I am quite a big fan of Torpedoes, I'm going to have to say damn them and go with Tom Petty.
Like paper.
Like, I didn't exactly sing praises for either of these albums. But like, they both have merit, but one has higher highs and a higher overall quality, and that's damn the Torpedoes for me. Because one thing I enjoy in my music is a catchy sing-along aspect, and Geography didn't have that for me at all. And Don't Do Me Like That alone clears Geography. Like, the highs of Geography really only make it to like my background music while playing like Rocket League or Minecraft or something, but nothing's bad, just mediocre. That's, yeah. Damn the Torpedoes.
Okay, well, that brings us to me. I actually like both of these albums. I actually was surprised by how much I did like Geography, even though it was inconsistent, as I said. It's only made up for it a lot in production and the music, more so than the songwriting and the lyrics, but still, if you know me, the main thing I listen to, just off the album club, I'm a big, big fan of 60s, 70s rock, also kind of going into the 80s. I'm a fan of Tom Petty, really like his music. And so I don't think anyone else was probably going to win the Battle of the Toms. So I am going to be voting for Tom Petty, but I do want to give a positive nod to all of viewers, a positive nod in the direction of Tom Misch, Geography. It was a good album. If you do like sort of coffee shop vibes and whatever, I would definitely go check him out. His album was actually pretty cool and groovy. So, that was, I believe, 4 votes for Tom Petty. That was Ben, me, Paper, and Fan. And then 1 vote for Tom Misch. That was Matthew. So, that's interesting. It wasn't unanimous, but it was something. So we're going to move on to who picked what album now. Obviously both albums were picked by at least one of us. Does anyone want to guess who picked what?
So I think
Chris picked the Tom Petty album.
I think Matthew picked the Tom Misch album, and I think Chris picked the Tom Petty album.
I think Geography was Matt, and Damn the Torpedoes was Chris.
Alright, just... See, one of you is lying. Because one of you just guessed...
I wait, can I say?
Go ahead.
I think Paper picked Tom. Paper picked Tom Petty.
Okay. Well, Fan's not lying, at least, but he's not right either. Sorry, Fan. But one of the people who just guessed that I picked Tom Petty is lying, because one of them picked Damn the Torpedoes, and that was Ben. Ben picked Damn the Torpedoes, not me, actually. As for Geography, I think it's pretty obvious who picked that. It was Matthew. I don't think it could have been anyone else. He or none of us, I don't think, had really heard of him other than Matthew, so that's just kind of, there's some that are easier to tell than others. Clearly, Damn the Torpedoes was not one of them. So that was an interesting matchup. We actually had a lot to say about both albums. I certainly had more to say about Geography than Damn the Torpedoes, but with some people it was the other way around. I certainly think that was interesting. Thus concludes the Battle of the Toms. Tom Petty has won. He said, "Damn Tom Misch's Torpedoes, we're gonna drop a nuke." So please be sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.